Hi there, this is Neil Salvage, and welcome to this podcast, Gassing On. Yes, we're going to gas on about the world of ground gas. We're going to meet people in the industry. We're going to visit places and generally find out about interesting things that are happening, developing, and the changes that have gone on before us. So welcome on board and hope you enjoy this podcast. Well, hello and welcome. This morning we're joined by Barrie Ackroyd of MTS, Membrane Testing Solutions. Good morning, Barrie.
Good morning, Neil.
And where do we find you this fine April day?
I'm sitting in my kitchen, just looking outside at a bit of a dull day, I'll be honest.
Well, normally we're tracking each other around the country, different places. You work nationally and you're here, there and everywhere, aren't you, Barrie, usually?
Yes, we are, Neil. We work all over the country, so it's very rare for me to be at home.
Oh, excellent. Well, things that I was going to ask you first of all, Barrie. I'd like to know a little bit about Barrie Ackroyd and about how MTS came into existence. Would you give us a bit of an insight into yourself, Barrie?
Of course, Neil. I started in the building game when I was 19, worked for a small builder for 5 years. I then moved over to a geomembrane lining company, which I never even knew existed at the time. But I started there when I was 24, learned the lining game, how to weld. We used to do landfills, lagoons, you name it. In anything with geomembranes, we used to do. I moved up to middle management and became a site manager for the larger jobs that we did. And then ultimately in 2000, I changed tack, and I said I'd had enough of being crawling around on my hands and knees in a muddy, wet hole, which you always are when you're geomembrane lining. And my company, Landline Limited, actually put me into the office. They said they wanted to retain my knowledge and experience and put me into sales. So I learned the sales techniques and pricing, etc. And ultimately, I ended up in the gas sector, because gas became sort of pretty relevant then at that time. And after that time, I developed gas mitigation measures, passive venting system design, went into all that. I developed a intelligent gas monitoring system, which was active, negative pressure with active sampling and data recording, etc. So I learned quite a lot whilst I was there. Now, whilst I was there also, the Sirius 735 project started.
Right.
And Kevin Mitchell, who I was working with at the time, he was actually put onto the steering committee for the for the Syria.
Yeah.
And obviously he lives in Edinburgh, so he said, well, it doesn't make sense. So in the end, I ended up moving on to the Sirius 735 steering committee, and that's when I knew that validation was going to become relevant in our industry. And at that time, I'd also been very unhappy at work, and I thought, well, now's the opportunity for me to use my knowledge and experience in the ground gas sector and start working for myself. So in 2014, Membrane Testing Solutions were incorporated, and here we are 7 years on.
Excellent. Well, it sounds a very similar story to mine, actually, Barrie. I think we took a very similar path, both construction men from the tools, moving up in the ranks, which I think it's quite key to set that for younger people in the industry that are on the tools at the moment, that there is opportunity. Are you quite passionate about that as well, Barrie?
I'm extremely passionate about the younger generations coming up through the ranks, Neil. You know, we're all getting on in years and ultimately looking forward to retirement. I'm a great ambassador for education. I just really want the younger people to come through the ranks and start taking over. That's my ultimate goal.
Excellent. So what does MTS, Membrane Testing Solutions, do, Barrie? What's their main roles and responsibilities?
Our main role, well, in fact, our only role is third-party independent validation of gas mitigation systems. We also do a little bit of waterproofing validation, but that's basically on combined systems. But yeah, we only provide third-party independent inspection and testing of gas mitigation systems, but we also do a bit of design as well. So we served on the steering committee for the retrospective Sirius 795 project, And we specialise in retrospective installation of gas mitigation measures. So we also do a bit of design as well.
Well, I always like to ask my guests what they think of like current guidance, legislation, regulations that are in place. Now, you've mentioned quite a few in the course of our chat so far. How do you feel about the British Standard 8102 and the 8485? Where do you think those two sit with each other at the moment? What's your views on that, Barry?
Yeah, it's a good one, Neil, because obviously you've got a crossover between waterproofing and gas mitigation measures, certainly with dual systems now, one membrane doing two systems, being bonded and gas resistant. So, yes, there is a crossover there, and realistically speaking, there should be more of a parity between the two, because at the moment there is a little bit of a disconnect. So I know that BS 8102 has actually been redrafted at present. So hopefully there's going to be a little bit more prevalence towards ground gas as well.
Excellent. Well, I've asked a few guests, so it's good to get a cross section of our industry of what people's views are. Have you had any input into any of the 8102 at all, Barry, or heard any rumours, any hot tips coming out yet, or nothing as yet?
No, I've not heard anything, Neil, but waterproofing is not my speciality.
No.
Not certainly basement waterproofing.
That's it. Yeah, it's a specialist art, and again, we emphasise that about when we do design and detailing with people about the waterproofing, and I do get asked a lot of questions in my training role on that, and I'm sure you do as well, Barry. Do people query you on both quite a bit?
Of course they do, but ultimately my response is total. We're not CSSW certified for waterproofing design, and therefore we're unable to comment. I'm a great believer of sticking to what you know and being specialist in that, rather than trying to cover a broad range and spectrum, of gas and waterproofing.
Yeah. So, what is the state of the construction industry at the moment, Barry? How do you see the land lying at the moment, especially contaminated land? How do you see it?
I think the contaminated land industry is broadening. It's getting bigger. Certainly more building going on. Contaminated land. People want to build on that rather than need to conserve the greenfield or green belts. The contamination land industry is actually, I think, is increasing. But also with that, the increase in quality as well. The people are trying to push forward to make sure that when we build on contaminated land, a lot of factors are taken into consideration. So, I think that the industry is actually tightening up on things, which is only for the best of everybody.
That's right. And are you seeing better quality installations, Barry, in your day-to-day activity of verification? Is it improving?
Well, that's a debatable one, Neil. At this moment in time, we see good work and we see poor work, and not always only poor work from ground workers. Yeah. So, it's one of those. It needs to be kept a lid on, really, because there are some poor working practices going on out there, and hence the validation process. And I think it just needs to be maintained.
And I think there still needs to be a lot more education out there. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Ground gas is one of these areas where there's absolutely no training whatsoever or a qualification. So I'm really keen, again, coming back to the education factor, I'm really keen to see that there are training sessions going on for ground gas mitigation design, although it's a bit of a hot topic at the moment, purely because of the areas that we work in. The people have only gained the experience through experience. Yes. They've not gone into a classroom and they've not learned stuff. So, yes, I think education is key. I would like to see quite a lot more design seminars and courses being produced. And ultimately, I think for ground gas mitigation, there should be a qualification in it, just so that people can demonstrate their abilities to perform what they say that they can do.
No, it's good to hear, Barry, and we're very active on that front, trying to push that. You're a BVC member as well, aren't you, Barry? Are you one of the committee members, one of the mainstays?
Yes, I am, Neil. At the moment, I'm currently vice chairman of the BVC. I'm, as you know, myself, I'm actually quite active in all areas of ground gas, Syria, Clare, the PCA. I try to maintain, as I said before, education.
So as we come to a close, Barry, where do you think the future is going to be for our sector and our industry? How do you see it? Where's your crystal ball looking?
Well, I wish I had a crystal ball, Neil, I'll be honest. But ultimately, I see that the industry is tightening up. I'm seeing that there's a lot more people looking to design. So that's great. I see that there's a lot more qualifications coming up on the horizon. But ultimately, it's all right having these qualifications. Like most practices, you get the qualification, you should work to those qualification practices rather than passing a driving test and then driving like a lunatic. So that's my ultimate goal, really, is just to make sure that people are working to the highest standards for the benefit of the industry.
That's great to hear. Well, Barry, it's been really appreciate your time you've shared with us and given us a little insight into MTS and Barrie Ackroyd. If anybody wants to get hold of you, Barry, how do they find you?
Yeah, they can find us on the internet, www.mtsltd.net. You can find me on my mobile number 07884 210 081 or email sales@mtsltd.net.
Excellent, Barry. Well, I'll put up a little flyer for you at the end of the podcast so people can look at that for you. And thanks for your time again, Barry. Much appreciated and hope to speak to you soon.
No problem, Neil. It's always a pleasure working with yourself.
Thanks, Barry.
Thanks a lot, Neil. All the best. Cheers. Bye-bye.
So thanks for joining us and look forward to seeing you again next time. Bye now.